All right, we're going to train a squat today. Squats 101. It's going to be pretty much elementary squat training, but we're going to emphasize some important points that often don't get emphasized in the squat. And I'm going to start with foot position because we're going to start from the bottom and work up. So you want your feet squared, shoulder width, maybe slightly wider than shoulder width. Go with what really feels good, but the feet should be aligned. Now, for a lot of us, shoulder width and square is going to feel a little bit pigeon-toed because I want the outsides of those feet square, and a lot of us tend to be externally rotated. So when you get them actually square, it feels a little funny. Now, when they're squared like that, particularly if you've been externally rotated and you squat, your knees are going to tend to come in for some of you. We don't want that to happen. So to prevent that, we're going to talk about where we put the weight and what we do with our feet. For your first 1,000 squats or so, we want 90% of the weight through the heel, and we want it through the outstep too. So before you do that, I want you to actually roll your ankles a little bit and push your butt back so you get your weight on your heels and on those outsteps. Now, when you actually squat, I don't want you to roll your ankles, but you feel like you're about to roll your ankles. The other thing we're going to do with those feet is we're going to abduct them. That means I'm going to be trying to push that mat apart as if I was stretching that mat. You can't push very hard that way, but it really helps lead into the glutes, which we're going to talk about more. So that's foot position. Now we're going to talk about the squat itself. Now the squat contains a hinge. Hinge is another very important functional fitness movement exercise. A hinge pretends like we have just two segments of our body that are hinged together here. So for a pure hinge, the knees don't even bend, and the spine stays long and neutral. Let me show you neutral spine. Neutral spine means your spine expresses as if it's straight. I don't want to be too arched in the lumbar, nor do I want to be round in the lumbar. I want to have a gap about the size of my finger between the lumbar and the wall or the floor if I was laying down on the floor. I hold that in place by firing the abs and then bring it on up. Here we're going to look at the head. Ideally, your head is going to be against the wall too. So again, your spine expresses as straight, but it's actually got a cervical arch and a lumbar arch. Now, if because of your posture, technique, or what have you, you're not able to get your head all the way to the wall, it's good to keep that chin tucked in and your face vertical, is if you're going to get there flat. It's better than going like that. That's not a neutral spine. We want to be working back towards having full neutral spine, which we can do with corrective exercises. So there's my neutral spine, which I'm going to maintain as I come off the wall. I'm going to maintain that with my abs drawn in and my pelvis controlled, nice and neutral. And the first move I want to do in a squat is push my hips back. I can tap my toes. And my knees are out a little wide. I'm back here. My weight's on my heels. I'm loading into my glute and posterior chain, which we're going to talk about more. And I drive right down. Look at that long neck. That's a long neck and a neutral spine. My weight's back on the heels. I like to bring the hands up in counter movement as I go down. We'll show other squats where we bring the hands out, sometimes with weights. And what this does is this really loads me back into the posterior chain. That's my glutes, my hands, my low back. And ideally, eventually, no rush, you want to be able to get down all the way in the hole, which means the hip crease is below the knees. Now that torso does lean forward a little bit here, and that's fine. And you want to be right back there into the posterior chain and finish that squat with a good squeeze of the glutes. If your pelvis tilts back a little bit, that's okay. Ideally, it's going to stay perfectly neutral even as I squeeze glutes, which gives me a full contraction of the primary mover here. And a full contraction is one of my primary principles that we'll also talk about later. Now, make no mistake, you are still using your quads. This is a two-joint motion. The problem is most people are quad dominant and they're squatting like this, too much into the front chain. They're grinding their knees. They're using too much quad and no glutes at all. We're going to keep the quads in it, but they come in second. The butt goes back, the glutes are engaged. I'm down. Once I get into the hole, I can really feel those glutes long, and they're going to contract all the way up and finish that squat. Work with that for a little while.